I do Fox College football over there on Saturdays, man. I love doing it, man. I had the honor of having an AP vote this year, also a Heisman vote, man. So it's been a lot of fun covering these teams. A great season once again in college football. Alabama lost last week to Vanderbilt. I'm an Alabama fan there, so it still hurts me to see if they bounce back. But a huge weekend for college football, headlined by the Big Ten game, Oregon and Ohio State. So let's talk about that and much, much more. Let's bring in the co-hosts of Gojo and Golic, Mike Golic Jr., hanging out with us here on the show, on the Rich Eisen Show. Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you, Mike. I feel awkward coming into this conversation as the Notre Dame fan. We're sort of the Cowboys of college football, where we're better than most of the teams, but we haven't gotten to that title, aka that Super Bowl, in a while. So we get a lot of that same hate for Cowboys fans. So I sort of feel where he's coming from.
Thank you, Mike.
So Mike, here's the thing. You get hate. You get hate because you get a lot of media exposure even when you're not winning. I'm talking about, but fans don't hate the Notre Dame Fighting Irish because the fans of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish aren't disillusioned. You're not saying, oh, we're going to win the championship this year. You're realistic. It's almost like being a Yankee fan sometimes, like, hey, we got to be realistic about our team. Cowboys fans could be terrible one year. This is the year. We're going to win it all this year. Laker fans could be terrible. This is the year. We're going to win it all this year. Forget everybody else. You guys are so, that's the problem that I have with the fans of those teams. So once again.
Yes, Mike, Yankees fans are known for being realistic and
okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's get back to business. Mike Golic Jr. College football, huge weekend. Hey, Ohio State may not be number one in the country, man, but they've been looking like the number one team. Now, they haven't played that team yet. I know they just knocked off Iowa and they dominated, but they are winning by almost an average of 40 points a game. They got a dominant defense. They got weapons on offense. What do you expect them to do when they have to go into Audacy Stadium? Always a tough place to play against Oregon this weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to start. It's going to be a phenomenal atmosphere. I've been fortunate to call a couple games up there, and it really is a crowd that can affect what goes on the field. You heard one of Ohio State's offensive linemen saying he doesn't like primetime games because he sees all the eyes on them there. Well, you're going to have the eyes, you're going to have the crowd, and you're going to have Jordan Burch and that defense bearing down and trying to cause problems. But I think, Mike, for me, the reason that I'm so heartened by what I've seen from Ohio State has nothing to do with Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, Will Howard in this offense, or even Jack Sawyer and the guys on defense that have been phenomenal. It's the offensive line for Ohio State this year. It was the biggest question I had about them coming into this season. And so far, watching their production, blocking for Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, that are two of the best in the country, they've been able to reestablish a line of scrimmage with Chip Kelly now coming over as the architect for that run game here as the offensive coordinator this year. I think that's been the difference for them so far this season. And it's the reason I went from before the season picking Oregon to win the Big Ten. I now going into this game and picking Ohio State to win because I think that group is that much improved.
Yeah, I mean, once again, and defensively, offensively looking good. Jeremiah Smith, man, that freshman is phenomenal, bro. What do you like about his game overall?
Yeah, I just think, and you see right there, that catch in the Iowa game was kind of emblematic of a receiver who's so strong despite his age going up there, and you see basketball-like ability to go and use his body and shield on catches. He's obviously got the explosive play potential. And I think when you look at him and Ryan Williams at Alabama, the thing that's so cool and encouraging about these young guys is no moment has looked too big for them so far. They've been able to go out there and shoulder the load in a lot of cases as the top option or close to it on each of their teams. And so to go along with that composure, the dynamic ability that both of those guys have, sky's really the limit. We're watching two, future top 15 draft picks right now as 17 and 18-year-olds.
All right, so Oregon, also a huge game for them as well. I mean, they started off the season, especially against teams like Boise State, barely beating Boise State. Boise State's a good team this year. They probably got the Heisman Trophy leader right now in Ashton Jeanty, right? But over the last couple of weeks, they have looked better, but still turn the football over in critical moments. I know Dylan Gabriel's been outstanding when it comes to accuracy this year, but how critical is this game for Oregon? Like you did mention before this season, you picked Oregon to actually beat Ohio State going in. What has changed your mind, and what will a win do for Oregon if they are able to knock off Ohio State on Saturday?
It would be massive for Oregon coming in year one in a new conference and being able to go and punch the biggest bully on the yard in the mouth. We know Ohio State and Michigan have been the teams that have been at the forefront of this conference, trailed by Penn State for most of recent history. And so it would go a long way. And I think For me, you mentioned those early shots in the beginning of the season, right? Close game against Idaho, close game against Boise State, big explosives given up on defense, which we're now seeing might just happen for everyone who plays against Dash and Genty. They made some big changes on their offensive line going back to the Oregon State game, a rivalry game that got played in September for the first time in the history of that series. And since then, they went from giving up, I believe, 7 sacks in the first 2 games to none since that shift against Oregon State. And so that group up front is going to have its best punch ready for the Ohio State defensive front. I think it's just going to be, can they push the ball downfield at all? Some of the weapons in this offense, it's been low and slow. They eat up a ton of yards the same way they did last year with Bo Nix, but there hasn't been that over-the-top capability that offense last year, which averaged almost 10 points per game better than the offense this year. That's going to be the real key. Can Oregon find some explosive playmaking against an Ohio State defense that's certainly got guys at every level that can do it?
That's going to be a huge game. Absolutely. The toughest test for Ohio State so far this season going in Austin. If they do that, of course, they could be the new number 1 team this week in the AP polls coming out. Let's stay in the Big Ten for a second because Penn State also has Ohio State coming up on the schedule. I believe that's November 12th when they play one another. Penn State can't beat Ohio State. They can't beat Michigan over the last couple of years. That's the only 2 teams they have not been able to knock off. But they got USC on the road this weekend. Is this Penn State team any different than any of the teams that we've seen over the last couple of years? They should make the playoffs this year because it's expanded to 12 teams. But once again, the importance of winning on the road at USC, knowing that you got Ohio State coming up a little bit later on in the schedule.
Yeah, I believe that this Penn State team has the capability of being better. I think Drew Allers looked more confident at quarterback this year. Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator they brought over from Kansas, has been allowed to do some of the same creative things on offense that we saw in Lawrence. And so you've seen some of the wonky formation, certainly plenty of window dressing before the snap, but it's created more explosive opportunities down the field early. They're still not a dynamic top-end passing offense yet, but they haven't had to be. And I don't think this weekend they're going to have to be either. USC still giving it up on the ground. We saw against Minnesota, they gave up almost 190 yards. Against Michigan, almost 300 yards with no threat of the pass to go along with it. And so I think Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, that's going to be enough in the backfield to get it done for them in this game. But I do think this is an opportunity in a big-time stage against a new conference opponent. You got to flex a little bit of that muscle in the passing game because people like me are still going to hold out the jury until I see them against Ohio State and what that looks like against the upper crust of the Big Ten that they just haven't been able to crack lately.
Yeah, Drew Allers looked much better this season throwing the football downfield. Like you said, Kotelnicki has got the team throwing the football down the field this year. But once again, Drew Allers looked good against all other teams outside of the big games against the Michigans and the Ohio State. See what he does against USC and that defense coming up. But Penn State on defense, once again, you can't do what you did against Illinois where you had a huge lead and then almost lose it as well. So that's one of the things that they got to look out for as well. I want to talk to you about Colorado. I know everybody still talks about the Colorado. I know they're not a ranked team. They got a huge game against Kansas State coming up this weekend at home. Colorado starting to put it together. Coach Prime, the guys, they've won 3 in a row. I got a lot of flack, Mike, and I probably deserved it, but I looked at, as I have an AP vote, I picked Colorado the first 2 weeks, and I picked them number 25 in AP voting. It was based on what I expected the team to be this year. And I expect the team to be much better than the team that finished the season losing 8 of the last 9 games last year. Didn't quite work out that way. They got blown out by Nebraska, but they've looked so much better since then. From what you've seen out of this Colorado team, how is this team different from last year, and do you give them any inkling of a chance against Kansas State at home this weekend?
I do. I think the team is much improved defensively from a personnel standpoint and just their overall execution on that side of the football. I think, we talk about Travis Hunter because he's a two-way star and a Heisman candidate, and we're so obsessed with Shedeur on the offense. I think we've kind of neglected to tell the story that, hey, statistically, they're not world beaters on defense. But, man, compared to what we watched last year on that side of the football for Colorado, that's an outfit that has its stuff together finally, and it showed. Now, it's going to get a steep test going up this weekend against Kansas State. Kansas State top 10 in rush yards per game going up against a team that's bottom half of college football in Colorado on defense. But on the other side, Kansas State's back end hasn't been tested by a passing attack like Colorado's got. So it's really what flavor of ice cream. It's almost, Mike, I think of it like an NBA game where it's 2s versus 3s in this one. And so it's going to be incumbent on hey, can this Kansas State passing offense muster anything to keep pace with Colorado on offense? Because Shedeur Sanders is another guy who's looked great this year. His work in the pocket and the poise that he's had behind an offensive line that has done a slightly better job of protecting him, but he still has to go out there and earn so much of what they're going to do offensively, along with Travis, who's managed to stay healthy and be effective both ways. So, yeah, I do think that team deserves a lot of credit for how they've improved, and I'm fascinated to see what this game is like because these teams couldn't be more opposite.
Talking to Mike Golic Jr., co-host of Gojo and Golic, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Hey, this is a quarterback world in college football, just like it is in any world when it comes to football. You know, Carson Beck's doing this thing. Obviously, Jalen Milroe. All the Heisman candidate trophies. Dylan Gabriel is also one of those guys who's going to be in the mix. Quinn Ewers before he got hurt, and now even Arch Manning down in Texas doing this thing. But how great is it that you got two of the top Heisman contenders right now? One is a running back and one is a two-way player. If you had to give between Hunter right now, who's doing an outstanding job for Colorado, and Ashton Jeanty, who's at Boise State, who's wonderful, leading the league and leading the nation in rushing right now, could break Barry Sanders' all-time record if he continues at this pace. If you were to give a little bit of a handicap right now, which one of those two would you say has the best chance of winning it all and having that Heisman at the end of the season?
Yeah, and like you, I'm fortunate to be a Heisman voter, so this is something I'm keeping a really close eye on, and I think right now you would have to give the edge to Ashton Jeanty for what he's been able to do, and I think the opportunity he has going forward for Colorado as they get into the meat Big 12 schedule. It's going to be interesting in a wide-open Big 12 this year. Can they capture some momentum and actually vie for that conference in a way that would have them in all these conversations, and provided Travis is healthy and can keep up with this insane workload that he's on, he would have plenty of great chances. But I look at what Ashton Jeanty's already done, and you know this, covering college football, it's hard for the group of 5 teams and players to break through in this way. And Ashton Jeanty was able to do it early in the season, putting up some video game numbers, using the game against that Oregon team as kind of a springboard to where now we're all conditioned. Hey, all those shows you watch, you guys mentioned Big Noon, when you see it on SportsCenter, they're running Ashton Jeanty highlights all the time when he busts these games, even when it is Utah State like it was last week. And so now that he's in the machine, they're going to have an opportunity against a UNLV team that's still firmly in the mix in the Mountain West and for that group of 5 playoff spot. And I think that just in general, you have the game against Oregon State at the end of the season, another Power 4 group, but also you've got that group of 5 playoff spot up for grabs. So we're going to be talking about Boise State for that, and we're going to be talking about Ashton Jeanty and seeing those plays in the zeitgeist with everything that gets discussed around the sport. I think it's hugely important, and I think he's got plenty of chances, and he's just that good. You can't tackle the guy. He's faster than you'd expect. He erases angles. And I think all that makes him the perfect group of 5 Heisman Trophy candidate who actually has a great shot of getting to New York and maybe even lifting the trophy.
I've heard of comparisons to Maurice Jones-Drew, to LaDainian Tomlinson. The guy had 178 rushing yards in the first half against Utah State, didn't even play in the second half. He's just been that good and still on pace to break Barry Sanders' record. Before I let you get out of here, man, the SEC has always been a dominant conference throughout the years. No matter how much hate they get, they just continue to win championships. Alabama getting knocked off by Vanderbilt this year. The SEC is definitely up for grabs. Georgia's already got a loss. Ole Miss got a loss. Missouri's got a loss. Right now, who would you say is the favorite in the SEC?
I think it is this Texas team, and that's why I'm fascinated for them. You know, looking at Oklahoma and the Red River game this weekend, Oklahoma's going to be starting a freshman quarterback for the first time in the history of this rivalry. It's the first time Texas has been number 1 in the Red River game since 1984. I know that I believe they're going to win. Oklahoma and Brent Venables have a really good defense, but they're going to have to carry the day. A whole new offensive line this year for Oklahoma. Their top wide receiver in Burks is out this weekend. So all these things working against them in this game. But for Texas, it's really for me about, hey, how healthy does Quinn Ewers look coming off a break the schedule afforded him to make? Because when he's out there, Arch Manning did a great job. And I know Steve Sarkisian says there's no change in how he calls the offense, and I believe him. But I think Quinn Ewers and the benefit of his experience, you saw on tape and you saw on the field through those first few games of the season, the way he manipulated the pocket, the way he spread the ball to involve all of those new weapons that came over this year for Texas. I think he affords them an advantage and makes them the best team in the conference when he's on the field right now. And so this weekend is going to be a huge measuring stick for that, because you're right. Georgia's got offensive line issues right now. Alabama's got to figure out what it's got going on defense. Ole Miss, same sort of deal for them when they get in a dogfight against a team that's physical up front on defense. Can they go and withstand that? A lot of the top end, Nico and Tennessee Vols got a gut check from that Arkansas defense last week. And so all of those questions here have created the perfect opportunity for Texas to come in year one, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but pun fully intended, grab the bull by the horns.
Wow. Hey, the Horns, they got to step up, man, the SEC. I mean, especially against the Sooners. They've lost 4 of the last 5 games against Oklahoma, including having the only regular season loss last year against Oklahoma. So we'll see. Is there, before I let you go, is there a chance, any chance, Sarkisian, if Ewers comes back, of course, he's a great quarterback, don't get me wrong, but if he comes back and he struggles at all, is there a chance that we see Arch Manning at all in that game?
I think there's always a chance, but I think that move would be much more predicated on health than it is play.
Okay.
If Quinn's going out there and struggling just because he's getting back into the flow of a game, which keep in mind, last year when we saw him in Red River, he was coming off injury and still performed really well in that game. But I think if there was any Arch Manning sighting in this game, it would only be because you had seen Quinn Ewers going out there and still dealing with some of the lingering effects of an injury that they want to try and really stamp out for the home stretch of this season.
All right, it should be a good game. Great weekend of college football. Every week is a great weekend of college football. That's why we love it. We didn't expect last week to be the week it was, with 5 of the top 11 teams going down and 4 against unranked teams. Man, that was incredible. I'm still hurting as an Alabama fan against Vanderbilt, but I think they'll bounce back against South Carolina this weekend as well. Mike Golic Jr., man, a pleasure talking to you, my brother, man. Always good seeing you, man. Keep up the great work.
Great seeing you, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.